And I sent y'all both the email with the questions, right? You get that?
Yes.
Okay. Does that sound interesting?
Very fine.
George Packard and Rosemary and myself and the people in the room, we have been talking about the human development projects. Can you understand me?
Yes.
Yes.
What we would like for you to share, and we'll start with Marilyn. How did the image get started or was created for the 24 Human Development Project? We were talking about it, but we're trying to find out, how did that image really get started? And from your perspective, what do you understand?
Well, from my perspective, at that time, Joe and I were in New York, and we came out to the summer program and received the assignment. I'm guessing that some creative heads in the cubby must have come up with that one project every hour on the hour around the globe.
What year was that?
That would have been in 1975. We did our first consult in Omubury. So it must have been that spring. I don't know. Those of you who were in Chicago might have a better grasp of that.
Judy, do you have any way to confirm that within your own life experience? Because y'all were the team that did the first 8.
No, I think what Marilyn said is that it came out of the thinking of the Rumi dynamics or that research group, but it was the image that I have is that it was an attempt to replicate the methods used in Fifth City.
Yes.
So it was a taking Fifth City to the world.
Yeah.
Jim, I'm going to interject a little bit of story that Jim Weigel shared with us. He said that you went and did a consult in Majuro as sort of and then out of that, the 24 came. Does that make any sense?
Yes, Majuro 1. And as a matter of fact, there was never a document developed until we went back to do Majuro 2.
Okay, so there was a Majuro 2. Okay. That's where that story gets clarified. Yeah.
Did you go through a full consult with each time?
Yes, we
Did
did.
the 4 of you with Matthews create the consult, or was that already given to you?
No, it was. I think it grew out of our battle planning methodology, and I think Jim might know more about this, but it was really being developed on as we went. And I know Matthews said to me, there was a question, why do I think I was included? He asked me to be the scribe of the methodology, and he said, I want you to write down what I do. And he was the one that was developing the whole plenary methodology. And it evolved, and Jim Weigel was the one who invented the cards, which really revolutionized our way of doing planning from then on. And I think it's been borrowed by a lot of consultants who now call it the snow card effect and things like that. But Jim invented that in Jeju. Rather than just writing all of the data on a blackboard and having to erase it and move it around, the cards were in his invention.
Wow, was that at the Omuguri one, or
Jeju.
that came? Oh, that was in Jeju.
Jeju. So that was that. Yeah, it was the Jeju consult.
Okay, all right.
And it's common practice in school systems now. You
Yes.
see it all the time.
Yep.
But the consult method itself evolved over a period of time out of the lens method.
Mm-hmm.
The lens course really began the development of that process of planning, strategic planning, and then also the town meetings as we worked on the construct for town meetings.
Oh,
It developed it, but what came first, the Majuro consult or the lens?
Yeah, the Majuro. I don't know. I don't know when that first Majuro consult was. Do you, Judy?
No, but it
before
must have been
75.
several years before, I mean, at least 2 years maybe before 75. Actually, Majuro was in 76, I think.
so y'all were not part of that Monroe concept.
We were part.
The second one we were.
Not the first one.
No, not the first one. That
But
was, I think, Lee Early, and it was focused around economic development first, and I think the whole idea of comprehensive development evolved from, I think they started with an economic piece because that was such a critical need in the Marshall Islands, and then I think eventually saw that we had to have a comprehensive development scheme, and added, I think, some of the other pieces that wouldn't have been like agriculture, for example, wouldn't have been part of the Fifth City construct.
Yes.
Right,
So
right.
they took all of the Fifth City stuff and then really pioneered with the economic dimension in that first Majuro consult, and then gradually rounded out the rest of the pieces in those. I think there were 9. Were there 9 modules, Marilyn? 9 areas? How many were there?
I do not recall, Judy, and I have not kept but 1 or 2 of the documents. They just got too cumbersome to lug around the world. But I remember Fischel was there when we went back to do Majuro 2, which was in early '76. And we wrote that document back in Chicago before we went, which was a summary of what the first consult generated. And somebody had kept really good notes, and we got the job of putting it into the design of all of the other consult documents. And I remember Fischel waving that yellow book and saying to the whole community gathered there, "This is like your Bible." He said, "Don't ever be separated from your yellow book."
Yeah.
Well, the second question was, what were the core values of what trying to do with initiating the 24? Have you answered that, or there's more that you would add to that? That's the question here in archives that we're wrestling with, trying to state, and one of the reasons we wanted y'all to get involved in this, we've had a lot of fun, is trying to put this jigsaw pieces together about Jesus Christ story and putting the resurrection before the birth. So we're really trying to put this picture and the story together, but at heart of the archives, we're trying to say, what are the core values that we want to preserve in history, through documentations and values. So that's why we're trying to say the core values as y'all struggle with them in creating the concept.
Well, I've got a little list here. I think what Judy said, Fifth City to the world, was a key value. Visibility, sign of hope and possibility within the poorest of poor communities. Then, of course, we were holding up values of self-sustenance, self-reliance, and self-confidence. A lot of our core values, I think, are embedded in those 3 sets of 5, the 5 Fifth City presuppositions, the 5 economic development principles, and the 5 presuppositions of community development that are all as part of the intro to every consult document. Anyway, I'll shut up at that point.
Judy, anything else to add to that?
Just the concept of human development itself. I don't know how common that term was at the time that we started using it, but looking at every aspect of the individual person, the human, what it meant to have a human community and to work at making it possible for every human being to live and meet their basic needs in a creative and meaningful way. So that's, I guess, what I would add.
And I think that the other value was economic and social, socio-economic. And again, that we emphasized that a lot. And of course, the design of our teams reflected that. In most of the consults, we had 5 teams, and 2 of them were more economic. And then we had the essential services, health, education, community life dimensions as well.
Well, Judy, Go ahead.
the whole thing of also of joining expertise that was available both within the nation or region with expertise from across the world to pairing that with the expertise of the local person who knew and understood his own situation and his his or her problems, the community issues, putting those together and connecting local people with the resources of the world. A lot of the replication work, when we started to replicate the projects, and I know that was the next phase, but a lot of that was connecting community leadership with like the government services that were available within the region and within the nation that people didn't know how to access, didn't have the skill, didn't have the confidence, didn't have the plan together to really make use of, and the whole idea that a community could that a plan for a community or development could be generated from the community itself, as opposed to a top-down, government or organization bringing in services or bringing in expertise. So the joining of those two and the giving power to the local initiative.
And another value, I think, was the public-private that we emphasized, so that there would be private resources as well as tapping in, as Judy said, to the available public sector resources that, in many cases, people didn't even know existed.
Yes. Well, when did you were there with the people, and there was the four of you and Matthews? How many other people did you add in, or how did that develop where you got a broader team? Would that start with Gary?
Well, we had as I was thinking about this, we had some consult junkies, didn't we, Judy? Two of them were the Bankses, and we just loved that when Garnet and Liz would show up. Now, they didn't get to every single consult, but they always added so much. The other consult junkies were the couple from Chicago, Sue and Dan. He was an electrician and unfortunately got electrocuted at one point later, but they came to many consults. She ended up marrying Steve Allen later. You probably remember. Well, yep. I'm sure, Judy, you remember them.
They were a very young couple, right? Yeah,
they were a young couple. But basically, and certainly the assigned auxiliary people were a tremendous presence in the consult, as they needed to be, because they were the ones that were going to help guide the implementation phase.
I can remember arriving in Gary and Bob Lingefelter was out on a horse, I think, fixing some kind of a water pipe or some kind of infrastructure issue in the community, so that in preparation for everybody coming, so that the basic necessities of life could be met. So the staff on site really were responsible for all of the nitty-gritty setup and preparation and hard work, that getting the community ready, getting the infrastructure there so that you could host an influx of 50 or 60 people.
Yeah.
And it was just a huge job. And I can remember arriving and we came into the situation not knowing really much about the culture, the people, the situation, and just to have people there that were on the ground that knew how to function was just critical.
and people who could warn us to lift up the lid of the toilet to make sure there was not a king brown underneath there ready to take a bite.
Yeah, and we did kill one of the local aboriginals killed a king brown that was passing by our
Right in the
console.
middle of
Passing by.
Yeah, right along the edges of where we were seated
Yep.
during one of the sessions.
Were you actually out in Umbulgari in that old brick,
We were out there,
rock
yes.
house? Yes.
40 miles up the Forest River, and Rod Wilson and I were bumped from the plane because the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and his wife showed up, and we had agreed to take the last plane in. So we ended up having to ride up the Forest River with crocodiles snapping on the side of the boat the next day to get there late.
What'd you think about that, Marilyn?
Oh, my goodness. It was a culture shock for sure.
Were there any other learnings, that was that other question, or experiences or stories that we would share as you became as you were a part of the team? Because I guess one of the other things I was not clear about, by thinking about that, did you just come back to Chicago and then wait until the next assignment, or were you involved in helping to choose the locations for the next one?
There was a site selection dynamic that preceded, in most cases. And no, we didn't come home but once. And it was tough because we left our 5-year-old twins, and Jenny was about 3 or 4 then, wasn't she?
She was with us some of that time.
Yeah. So that was, Marilyn cried all the way across the United States. And finally, when I hit the Pacific Ocean, I stopped crying. But it was tough. I have a couple of things that I think were learnings. That site selection was critical in advance, and that had not been pulled off in Korea. So we did the Jeju consult, not the Kwangyung Ilri consult.
Yes.
And that was really hard to do. The other thing, the urban, I think, was a bit more challenging than the rural. Part of it was the complexity, the sophistication of people. I'm thinking of the Isle of Dogs and Kaungwari. And then later on, when I was pulled out of India to do the Kreutzberg consult, I would say that it was just harder to get your arms around the urban. I think the inclusive representation of the community was critical. We had 60 of the 100 people that attended the Maliwata consult were from the village. And again, in places where that wasn't possible, like I remember in Kreutzberg Ost, there really were not that kind of preponderance of local people. So that was a key learning, I think. The magic of pulling those rational charts together. There were really 2 people that were charged with being the facilitators of the plenaries. One of them did a lot of the organizing, and then the second person came up and miraculously, and often we surprised ourselves when we were in that role, pulled together a balanced chart, the likes of which I think people who now use the method in their own private consulting are maybe not quite as anal about as we were. The contradiction writing was a real difficult part of doing the document, and naming those root causes, and great agony from the team who worked on that. In Canberra, Australia, and Judy, you remember this, I'm sure. It was our first document, and we were developing that section on the actuating programs, and we wrote and wrote and wrote, and it didn't pass muster with JWM, and we were so tired, we took a break, and we all went to sleep, and then we got up, and we worked way into the night, and finally, it broke through, and it was the need to do snake eyes on the tactics chart and really cluster those such that they would be saleable programs for funding the project. I'm going to shut up now, and Judy, you add. I've got other things.
About snake eyes, was that something that came out of Lynn's, or was that something that came out of the, I know it came out of the movie, but...
Yeah, the little big man. No, I used that image because I think that's kind of what we had to do. I know Garnet Banks and was a part of that. I had the lovely assignment of writing the prolegomena section of the document and editing the other parts. Judy had this assignment of doing the beautiful charts. And so we thought we could skin out of being part of that actuating program, morass. But I still cannot lay out what the methodology is because I never actually helped to create those. Fortunately, it was assigned to somebody else.
That was the actuating programs?
Yeah. That's the last section of the document where the funding, projected funding is laid out. And that would allow development people to go with the document and make a pitch for getting support. Yeah.
Well,
Very interesting.
Jim told us a story when we were talking about did you know kind of thing. He said that it was not until way into some of the projects that y'all were allowed to do one of the plenaries that you were. When was that?
Well, Judy, I think, was the pioneer, weren't you, Judy? You did the proposals plenary?
Satungan, I think. Was it Satungan? It was the first plenary that I think, or maybe it was before that.
I think it was before that. I think it might have even been Wanda, but I'm not sure. It was Matthews did them all, and then the men were moved in. But I think you preceded the men, didn't you, Judy?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Then Joe and Jim, and I was just hoping and praying that I wouldn't get called upon. But we all, it was baptism by fire, and it was very scary, especially that second part where you had to come up with that rational chart.
Yes.
Yeah, but
it's such an intuitive process, and you have to let go of feeling like you know what you're doing or what you're coming up with. I mean, if you're truly listening to the assembled plenary, to the people there, and then you don't know the answer before you start. You're
yes.
You're listening and you're trying to make sense. You're trying to hear and understand what people are saying, and then you're trying to gestalt it in a way that reflects back their ideas, not just yours.
Yes.
And trying to manage the complexity, trying to manage the process. It was a very scary kind of thing, but you had to just let go of feeling in charge.
Yeah.
And feeling, and you had to let go of the idea that you could control this.
And then and doing it in 2 languages, because it was all done in translation, with the exception of the Isle of Dogs.
Which was good, because that gave you a little think time.
Yes.
Time to process what you had just heard and be ready to listen again. You could write a book on the learnings of just, human development programs and how to do village development. A couple things, though, that just come to mind for me. One of the things I realized doing the consults, and I think this happened probably in India, but it was a gradual dawning, was that the world was divided into 2 parts, rural and urban, not something else. And that the urban people, whether they were North Americans or Europeans or Asians, had more in common with each other. For example, Vinod Parekh or Mary and Cyprian D'Souza had more in common with me and Jim and some of the other consultants from around the world who were middle class, developed world urban people than they did with the rural people in their own country.
Yes.
So it was this reality. And I think that was significant. Then the other thing, and this is more, looking back and, reviewing from where I am now, I learned so much as a human being about the world and about the situation of other people. I think I learned so much more than anyone I worked with. In other words, the benefit of this, as far as I was concerned, was it gave me something you couldn't buy. Anybody who wants to travel or see the world or interact with other cultures, you couldn't buy the experience that we had. Mm-hmm. It was a very valuable in shaping who I am as a person and how I live and how I think, and I just hope that for the people we were ostensibly trying to serve and work with, that they got as much as I got from that process. So I think as the years have gone on, that perspective, that part has grown, the value to me. And my sense, when you're young, you think you're going to save the world, and, you're bringing the gifts of developed world culture and so forth, and to people who don't have this, that, or the other thing. But as as the years have gone by, that's faded in the background, and I just appreciate so much what other people have, what those experiences gave to me. Mm-hmm. And what you're rubbing shoulders with, the people in Maliwata and Kalangwari and, all of these places that we worked and spent our lives, anyway, it's been valuable.
Let me ask if I can,
yes,
Judy.
I would say that
Go ahead, Marilyn.
No, go ahead. Follow up with.
Well, I was going to ask, was it more the intercultural, or was it more the stretch of inventing and creating something new in the situation? What that you described that second learning coming from for yourself?
Well, both of those, but I can remember, and this came the next year when we were in Maliwata doing the Human Development Training School, and during the weeks that we weren't training, the 5 weeks after that followed the 8 weeks of the training program, we were out in the villages doing consults with the newly trained staff, and as part of the replication process. And I can remember being in the village of Ambati with Keith and Sandra.
Keith
from Britain. Anyway, they were the local staff, and I and maybe some others, maybe Gautam Gosave or various staff had gone in to help with the consult. And I can remember carrying water and experiencing both a feeling of denigration that, I was a beast of burden, but also profound identification with the women in that village who carried water,
Oh, yes.
I can remember coming home one night from the training center late at night after everybody had gone to bed at we called it the castle, the renovated castle that we lived in. And it was a hot, hot night. And I came home maybe 10, 11 o'clock, and I was pregnant with the twins at that point, and I went to get some water, both to drink and to bathe, and there was no water in the water jar. And you just feel life's contingency just by experiencing those kind of things in a way that reading about it or hearing about it, or, you just, those are life-changing events. Anyway, and then, there are many stories like that, but that's the kind of impact, I guess, that, that I'd be pointing to. Deep experiences of otherness, of struggle, what it means to struggle to be a human being under conditions that are threatening to life. In Molly Water was always the question of water, whether there was going to be enough water. I can remember, Marilyn, you probably remember this, when the well that we got water from, the farmer's well that we got water for the training center, ran out of water, and then we had to go to another farmer, and then he ran out of water or was running out of water, and then, we had to go to the next place to try to find water, not just for ourselves, but for the 75 people that we had brought in to train, and,
And then there was always the question of funds for food, whether we would make the money stretch enough to get the rice, etc., rice and dal for the meals.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There we are.
And I can remember talking with Mary D'Souza, who was in charge of the kitchen for the training center. She was in charge of food and, purchasing and that kind of thing, and asking her why we couldn't have chapatis, why we couldn't have parathas, which were cooked with oil, whereas the chapatis were cooked on the dry coal. And it was a question of money to buy oil.
Yeah.
To make that type of bread, which is more pleasant and a nice break.
I think another thing that I would point out, and this is the fact that we four spent a whole year with each other as people who didn't know each other that well, hadn't been assigned together before, and in very intensive work and living conditions. And you learn something even more about corporateness than you learn when you live in a religious house, I think. And it was just a profound kind of colleagueship. At the end of every consult, the four of us, one of whom claimed that he was a monotone, an incurable monotone, had a special song that we sang as a farewell. You remember the Hayseed song?
Wanda, can you hear me? Y'all hear me?
Yep.
Joe made us do dog and pony shows sometimes for the local staff.
Well, we're doing a dog and pony show for y'all of what it means to do this technology and this future. George forgot to bring his battery cord, so his computer battery went down. You know how that, I think that's a good example of what we learned in all of those processes, that you just have to adjust. So I went back on my iPad. Is Steve with us?
Yep.
Sure.
Okay, and Steve, you have been recording all this, right?
Yes, I have been recording.
Okay.
No guarantees that
I
got
don't know. I was watching curiously as they, but I guess what we should go ahead and do. I just love this, and that's why we wanted to have those. And why I think, as Terry Bergdahl talked about when we started here in the archives, he thanked all of us who spent our money to go, get a plane or whatever, and pay $30 for and everything a day to come here and work on the archives. What crazy people would do that?
Yeah.
Right.
But we see this as critical, and having been in this process for a couple of years now, And I don't know what part y'all have been involved, but we're at such a great point in where we saw that we are just going to get the archives in shape to be accessed. And what we want to do, we're going to each main topic will have a website where people can go and see stories and documents. But we have a T-shirt, and I'm sorry we don't have the video to show the T-shirt. Anyway, it's a T-shirt with all these little peaks on it. See, there's no camera here. My camera's not up. I hate this iPad. No, anyway, it doesn't do what I want it to do. Anyway,
Should have bought your computer.
Huh? I know I should have wrote my computer, but no, I decided not to. I know. Anyway, that last that question was, I think we said, what was your understanding of why you were chosen to be on the team? But I think y'all pretty well shared that unless you have something else to add.
I never have figured out that. Well, I was chosen. Oh.
Well, I think
mystery.
Yes, it's a yes. Well, then I want to know.
Y'all were picked by Matthews.
Yes, we were picked by Matthews. That's right.
Matthews. And Matthews, for a long time, came in and talked about the 24 before they did the 8. He was obsessed with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And we've been going and getting some documents. And what we see our role here in these 2 weeks is to get on top of what is here and to answer these questions that we've been asking y'all. What's important about the 24 Human Development Projects of why and who do you think in society today would access our information? Why would they access, and who might they be?
Well, I think that anybody who is involved in any kind of local development, whether they go in like Partners in Health to build a clinic and network with the public health system, as our son John and his wife did for 2 years in Malawi, they could benefit from the comprehensive approach that our experiment with human development brought about. I see that as a lack in a lot of what's going on today, and they think that they are so singularly focused on one area, and we decided that we would not fall into that trap, and I guess the world still hasn't gotten that message.
So if we were going to target some communities and go out to get them, any others that you think of?
Well, I think local development organizations, university faculty who are working in the area, and I don't know what department it would be, but I know that Ed Shin, I think, has...
Theology, maybe.
Yeah, Ed Shin has done some of that. George, you've done that with the university, right?
Not that much. No.
Not that much. But somehow getting it into our institutions of higher education, because there is such a hunger now. I mean, now the junior year abroad is no longer Italy and France. It's all over the world.
Yes, and more students are choosing that.
Yes, indeed. Or it's required. I know at my alma mater it is required of all students now, which is really, I think, a sea change, positive.
Unfortunately, the southern schools have not gotten that up to date, but they're coming. They're coming.
Yeah.
I think that personally that there should be a service requirement for every citizen. Young people, as they come of age, either before college or after college, to do some kind of service as part of their education or their public, in place of the military or whatever. Yes. And I think this kind of work, this kind of exposure would be, would go a long way towards solving a lot of the world's problems that we have today. If more young people could be exposed in these kind of ways to the rest of the world, and particularly the rural.
How do you think we could attract people? What words or phrases or symbol could we put out into the world that might attract these people to come to our website? I think we've got a lot of creativity, and we're going to put stories and symbols and pick some key documents, and that's something that we would give y'all assignments if you choose to take it. What would be the 4 or 5 documents that we would scan and put on that website so people could kind of see what we were doing?
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of a brooding kind of thing. But the top end of that question is, how would we get people to access it? Okay. Yeah.
Good question.
Anybody? This is anybody. We're all.
I think you might start with picking a village that made it.
Any suggestions?
Well, Jeju, Gwangyangili, Io, in a lot of ways, Maliwata. Umbaguri would be an interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder about,
especially when the Prime Minister came there and gave his speech of asking forgiveness of the people, but something that would attract them and say this is worth looking at. There are lots and lots of methodologies out there now. As most of you know, when we first went out to the villages, there was hardly anything there. When we were last working in villages in the Philippines in 2001, 2002, you couldn't go into a village that didn't have 2 or 3 NGOs, some kind of community development group in the village in contact. That's just multiplied tremendously. And they all have their sets of methods.
Good. Well, I guess. Go ahead.
This may not be an answer to this question, but something that occurs to me in relationship to it. It would be interesting if there was a way to collect the stories of some of the young people we trained. India and Africa and different places, and kind of a little bio of what they're doing and what happened as a result of their experience, and then pair those with stories of people who, from the developed world who had that experience and were transformed by the experience of that encounter. That should be interesting to, I think, a range of people, certainly university students, but others who seek volunteer experiences. And I don't know.
It occurs to me that there are two groups of people. There are the students who are now increasingly taking a gap year, who might be candidates, Judy, for what you were talking about in terms of the service experience, international service experience. And then there is the plethora of baby boomers who are living longer and who maybe didn't do their global exposure at the front end of their life like we did.
That'd be more like your guardian group was at that point.
Yeah.
Was one of the things that they said in ICA International in Nepal. They were recommending to people to go and volunteer and do things at the ICA International offices. The key, because there was stuff there that people could continue to be involved in and get to know and be of help. The key part was just be sure and go and work with them, not somebody else.
Yeah.
You know how that has gone in the past.
Right.
But Diane McCabe and Terry McCabe were in Indonesia this past summer, and they went to Bantoa. And when they asked what they could send them the pictures and stuff and what was the address, they said, send it to us on Facebook or our email. And so one of the things we were talking about was the new human community may well be these networks doing what we're doing and doing this online group work and stuff like we did in Nepal and a variety of stuff, that there is a new community out there and it's not necessarily geographically located.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So, well, I'll give George, or anything else, George Holcombe, any other learnings or stuff you would share?
Well, I don't know if Marilyn is ready to go get a Guinness. You remember? Do you remember that night?
I do.
Wanda went to Ireland and she had the real Guinness this past summer. She had the real Guinness.
Oh, boy.
Somehow, pulling some of this stuff together, because it's all so great. I don't know if there's some way to focus on one or two universities, some professor, somebody that's looking. You got to have to find somebody that's hungry. And I'm just not sure how to reach out to do that. I don't know if Bergdahl has some contacts. I just don't know. And it may not be this country. It may be other countries, because their universities are coming on strong.
Yes.
And are looking pretty hard. Yes. Let me suggest a book. Wanda's heard this speech 100 times before. But we're talking about living in the screen. And I don't know, maybe y'all have already read it. It's called Entering the Shift Age by David Houle. He's a global consultant, and he's in the futurist lineage of Nesbitt and what's his other name? What's the other? Toffler. But he points out that it's not about people's place that you come from now. It's about your screen, that people live off their screens now. And he points out two other interesting things that we ought to bring to this, because I think we saw this, is that the individual now is more powerful than they've ever been in human history. And the Arab Spring pointed that out, how they rolled that out. And he also pointed out that this is the century of the woman. And the reason for that is that all the male institutions are bureaucratic. And by the time you run things up the flagpole in a bureaucratic institution, somebody else has already invented it and selling it. Yep. And that women are networkers.
Yes.
And they don't like the bureaucratic. They don't function well in bureaucratic systems. And we need to go to work off of that, because one of the things we learned, I think all of us learned in the village work, was if the women weren't going to be willing to go, you just well move on. That it was the men was always hung up in their egos and trying to make a decision that it wouldn't cost them, because if it failed they would lose face. But the women were the ones who were willing to do anything to get their kids fed and educated and health care.
Yes.
Some of those angles, it seems to me, that we've got to do to get people interested in the archives.
Well, I'm going to ask George Packard. What's your...
Put me on the spot, will you?
What else would you say in all of this?
Well, I think most of the things that you have said, or the obvious things we had come up with, but I really appreciate the subtleties of your observations and your thinking and your memories. The key is this question of the relevance to today, and how you supersede or where the need for local community reformulation or local community development is, where the human development and community are in connection, or how we translate the human development to the on-screen connection, as George was pointing out, seems to be the real issues behind what we're dealing with here as we curate our collection of materials. We've got a great collection. What do we do with it? And how do we present it?
And we do wish you would, at least you would email us by the end of the week. What do you think are the 6 documents we should, even if you don't, 6 documents we should scan? What we'll do is look for them or ask you to send them to us. But if we were to take, is that 6? Is that kind of 10? 10 documents or key things that, and that could be a video, could be an article. It could be like, we definitely want, the Human Development Training Manual is sort of large, but we can do that.
Yeah, or decide what part of it.
Or what part of it. But
For them to look at.
we really would wish that you would send that into it. Judy Hamji is going to be here tomorrow working with us too. And we want to pull in as many people as we can, but we wanted to start with y'all. And we're experiencing, this is part of this new world, is experimenting on using and learning. Us old folks have a harder time using it than the young people. They just zip zap and do it, off the cuff of their hand, but it takes us a while.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, I'm not as good as some, but I can't tell you how much
Look at Steve there.
Yeah. He's old.
And I think Holcombe, you ought to go back to those chin whiskers you used to sprout. So you have the Lennon look.
Yeah, the Van
Yeah,
Dyke.
that's right. That's right. I tried growing a ponytail, but that didn't work out either.
I wanted to say a thank you to Steve for getting this conversation hooked up. I have no idea how you did it. Would love to know how, but
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Steve.
It
You
has
give
to do
good
with
lessons.
its mustache.
You're very
Well,
welcome.
so
I will try to get the transcription up on the internet. I also been doing my best to take some, fly on the wall notes here on what you all said. And I think there are likely going to be some very nice chunks, especially of the kind of personal experience. And, what you really communicated was a profound sense of regard for the people that you had occasion to be with. If we could just invite people to express that sense of profound regard for and respect for the well-being of, unknown, unexpected parts of the world, what a gift that would be.
yes.
well, we would like to invite you also. Go ahead. Whoops.
Go ahead.
Judy?
What? I missed what you said.
You were going to say something?
No.
Well, I do have some of another invitation to step out into the unknown. When that wedge blade thing?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, no longer in the not yet. To step out in there and come join us on a Google Hangout tomorrow morning when Terry Bergdahl is going to talk about, was it 9 o'clock? Chicago time? Thereabouts. And Keith, Elise Packard, and Kay
Hayes.
Skagway are going to do a thing on Imaginal Education. And we're going to play with Google Hangouts, and it's fun. And if Steve, if they wanted to do that, how would they learn how to do that tomorrow morning?
Can't hear you, Steve.
we would send them an invitation.
Sorry,
Okay.
the place that you will be able to see it is live or later on YouTube. And if you're able to, see video on your computer screen, probably most everybody can. It should be very easy to do that. And I'll make sure that all of you get a notification later today when and where and how to do that.
Great.
Yes. And this is the new edge of the or Judy knows this, she lives with it. The top people have really gotten into this, and it's just amazing, this new part of what it's evolving. So it's kind of, for me, what Top is doing with the group process is what we were learning how to do with the consult process. It's that inventive and that exciting. So we thank you all. Any last comments by anybody?
Say hello to Joe.
I shall.
Yeah,
Big
please
hug
do.
for all.
Saludos.
Give him a kiss for all of us.
Okay.
And Judy, I tried to get Jim on. He said, I'm too busy.
Oh,
So I guess this is the only way we'll get on the, only way we meet these days will be on the sky.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you
Thank you all
Okay.
very much. And thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
bye.